Ahoy hoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome, and if you're joining us from a previous video, hey, we love to see it, and I hope you're doing well. It's Season 5, the last season of the Fox era. After just 72 episodes, just 7 shy of Star Trek the original series' 79-episode run, Futurama would not be renewed by Fox for a 6th season. Was it because the show just all of a sudden started to go downhill at a breakneck pace, or was it because Fox has a historically bad track record with animated series? Well, there's only one way to find out. What worked, what failed, what psychedelic honey consumption will be curtailed. I feel so alive because it's time to review Season 5! Haru! Future Earth is going through something of an intense heat wave, and it's up to the Planet Express crew to mine Halley's Comet and keep the tradition of just dropping a giant ice block into the ocean to cool everything down alive. The only problem? It's all out of ice. We also learned that Bender relates to turtles because he can't get up when he's knocked on his back either. The scientists go to Kyoto, where Al Gore's head, played by returning guest Al Gore, offers some moon sapphires for any scientist that can solve this horrible issue. Turns out the robots that Farnsworth made while he worked with Mom were just pumping all kinds of exhaust into the atmosphere, and they need to be taken out. So all the robots are gathered for a righteous rager put on by the one true party president, Richard Nixon. The party being a guise for them to take out the robots without any issue. Farnsworth and the gang are determined to save the robots, and they're able to get the robots to use their exhaust to push the Earth further from the sun and actually cools it down and adds a whole week to the calendar. Honestly, it's a fun episode that never takes itself too seriously. It's also one of the few times this season we actually get a guest star, even if they're returning, and would even come back for the movies, funnily enough. It's also really funny that this episode is actually the first appearance of Hedonism Bot. I always thought he was in the whole show, but no, he really just started showing up this season. The episode is just good classic Futurama, and that's kind of my biggest problem with this season. You would think a season before cancellation would probably have weaker writing or way more flaws than the previous seasons, but no, they're going all in. You can see they still had a ton of ideas they wanted to use, and if they're going out fighting. Crimes of the Hot is an episode I revisit frequently because it's just so well written. I mean, the jokes are super sharp, and while there's very obviously a message about global warming, even having Al Gore in the episode 4 years before An Inconvenient Truth would come out, it's never too preachy about it. They cleverly work it into the actual plot of the episode, and it never tries to be more than it is. It's just a backdrop for a fun Futurama episode that humanizes Bender. Crimes of the Hot is a humid and toasty 10 out of 10. Hey, look, it's that episode everyone knows and thinks of as the emotional core of the entire show. I know you know the ending of this episode. It's arguably one of the best endings to an episode of really anything. But let's look at the episode as a whole. The gang are taking a tour of old New York when they come across the pizzeria that Fry worked at, and with the relics of this forgotten time, Fry sees the fossilized remains of his beloved dog, Seymour Butts. Fry is determined to get his dog out of the museum, and they refuse because they need him for research purposes. He protests, and when he gives the researchers some very basic info, they just hand over the dog, and now Fry is racing around to get everything ready for when Professor Farnsworth can bring his dog back to life. He starts adding dog toys and beds to his apartment, and Bender starts to get jealous of all the attention Fry is showing his fossilized little buddy. So when the good professor is ready to harness the power of magma to bring the dog back to life, Bender chucks Seymour into the lava so he can't be brought back. Throughout the episode, we also get flashbacks to what Seymour was doing while Fry was gone, even going so far as taking Fry's parents to the cryo lab where if they just looked to their right, they'd see their frozen son. I don't know. There's a lot of scenes that just don't make sense in the episode. We literally saw Bender relate to a struggling animal in the last episode, and you could even say he viewed the turtle as a kind of pet. And even before that, Bender always seemed to relate as a friend, not as a pet, which yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't have such an issue with it if continuity wasn't such an important element of Futurama. So much happens for a reason. But when Bender sees the error in his ways and how devastated Fry is, he jumps in to save Seymour. He manages to save the fossil, and when they're getting ready to reanimate him, Fry sees that Seymour lived a full life after he was frozen. Now, the only reason I have such a problem with the events earlier in the episode is because of how this episode concludes. The conclusion to the episode is easily one of the best conclusions of any episode of anything ever made because it's so effortless in how it pulls at your heartstrings. Seymour didn't go on to find a new family or live a new life. He sat and waited for his best friend to come home. To him, Fry was his whole world. And when he couldn't wait any longer, he put his head down for the last time. It's not a story exclusive to Futurama either. Pets just care that much sometimes. That bond is something you can't just wish away. And there's a true bittersweetness to this episode because of it. A tragedy found in Fry trying to rationalize what happened. Obviously, my gripes with the earlier bit of the episode don't take away from the impact here, but it just hits so much harder the older you get. The more experience you have in life, the more loss you've had to deal with. Jurassic Bark is an always waiting 9 out of 10. It made me tear up recording this. I was actually gonna give it a low score. Come on, it's still good. It needed just a little bit more tuning and it would have been even that much better. It is okay to cry, gang. Never forget that. Anyway, Q*bert and Dwight poured salt on their bully and get stuck at Planet Express for the summer, while Professor Farnsworth and Hermes encourage them to get a job. Tonal whiplash! Fry and Leela use Bender to make beer. I'm man enough to admit I cried at Jurassic Bark on this rewatch and even reviewing it, and honestly, this episode was funnier to me in this rewatch than it ever was before. Obviously, I don't think this was intentional since the air date for all these episodes is all over the place, but if you're watching in order on Hulu, where the new seasons of Futurama are, I don't know, I think you'll have a better appreciation for this episode than just watching it as a one-off. It's dumb, but also that's fine that it's dumb. Q*bert and Dwight do a paper delivery route and they start performing better than any of the Planet Express crew, so they end up buying the company, and while Hermes and the professor should be proud, they're stunned that their son surpassed them so quickly. Turns out they've just been leaving the papers in a moon crater and pretending they delivered it, so they need their dads to fix it for them. I'm not usually a fan of Q*bert, but I'll say this is probably one of the strongest Q*bert episodes ever made. It's good to see him have a friend in Dwight, and at the end of the day, yeah, they're dumb kids no matter how much they want to pretend that they're these super geniuses. It's a very human episode because, you're supposed to be proud of your sons, but that jealousy is still gonna be there. The jokes are solidly written, and it's actually pretty fun having our Hermes and Farnsworth episode where the main three just kind of take a back seat. The beer brewing is fine, but it was really just a dumb B story for the sake of being dumb, and that's totally okay. Also, big shout out to Billy West on Professor Farnsworth this season. They're making him much more of that mad scientist idea, and they're letting him have a lot more fun with the character, which really shines in this episode. He not only feels like Q*bert's dad, but also just an old professional at what he does, and also maniacal in a way. I don't know. The route of all evil is a refreshingly simple 8 out of 10. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Oi! It's Freedom Day, everyone! A day where everyone is free to do whatever they want, all for the sake of being free. Nude hot tubbing? Freedom Day! Zoidberg loves Freedom Day and Earth, and so when the crew go to DC to watch a fireworks display of Charleston Chew, Zoidberg is so flooded with patriotism he eats the Earth flag in front of everyone, and they go to attack him. He manages to escape to his embassy where they keep him sheltered and he gets put on trial. It's very reminiscent of the arguments that sprang up in post-9/11 America, especially about flag desecration as protected speech under the First Amendment. Can someone be patriotic and love their nation and destroy a flag? A conversation that had existed well before 9/11 and is still debated about today. And that's kind of the magic of Futurama that makes it so timeless and evergreen. When it tackles a lot of issues, they do it with enough nuance that there's never a real specific time they're referencing, which I'm sure isn't foreshadowing at all. But it's much in the same vein as South Park's I'm a Little Bit Country that came out just 4 months after this episode. There are different ways people are patriotic, and a nation is at its strongest when it embraces all of its citizens. Anyway, because they want to take out Zoidberg for his transgressions, his embassy decides to launch a full-scale attack and take over Earth. This is a great episode and easily one of my favorites of the entire series because of not only Phil Hendry as the polygamy-supporting super patriotic soldier turned lawyer, or Hugh Man, totally trustworthy dupe cadet, but just the earnestness that's in the episode. It's just fun and oddly patriotic in the best way. Even in the end of the episode with the giant mud fortress, it's Zoidberg desecrating a flag that ends up saving the day and freeing the Earthlings. It's got great comedy. Again, Billy West does a wonderful job as Zoidberg. He's really come into these characters, and it's easy to see why. He knows what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to act, and Zoidberg is just this unhinged lobster man in the best way. And so yeah, when he burns the flag and chucks it so that the ICBM can hit it, it circles back in a non-nihilistic way and ends on a high note. A Taste of Freedom is a flag complimented 9 out of 10. You know the line, gang. Say it with me. If I had a nickel for every male character that gets knocked up this season, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but weird it happened twice. I will admit I did enjoy the holodeck always malfunctioning and sending holograms out on a rampage, but when there's a hole blasted in the side of the ship, Leela touches Kif's ungloved hand, and that's enough to knock Kif up a notch. Get it? That's the name of the episode. The rest of the episode is centered around Amy not wanting to grow up and raise a family that was poured in her lap like a piping hot cup of responsibility. There's not even a B story to the episode, it's just all Kif all the time. I don't know. After Where the Bugalo Roam, it feels odd to have another Kif-centric episode like this where they're throwing a baby shower, and before long they're taking him to his home planet, Sans 1 Smizmar, to do the ritualistic birth. I know it's supposed to be about the responsibility of parenthood and how you can be a parent even if you're not the biological one, but the episode ends with the tadpoles swimming out and not resurfacing for another 20 years, an idea I really hope they don't take literally and somehow work Kif's kids into the overall story. That'd be a really weird thing to do, all things considered, especially if it's not just a one-off episode like Where Are They Now, and they really thought, hey, let's bring back 3 of these tadpoles as recurring characters in a season after the perfect series finale. Oh, I'm not bitter or anything. Who's stalling? You're stalling. I don't know. The episode never really found its stride for me and just kinda goes on. The jokes are very hit or miss, and after the initial holodeck stuff, it just feels unnecessarily stretched out like an AI trying to spell strawberry. Kif Gets Knocked Up a Notch is a Smizmar supported 6 out of 10. Looks like the What If machine was on the fritz for these next 2 episodes. I hate myself too, don't worry. This episode finds Fry and Leela sore after building an IKEA super collider, and Zoidberg gives them some ointment that turns out to be miracle cream. When they rub it on their bodies, they get superpowers. Bender naturally joins in when they try and be superheroes, so you have Bender as Super King, Leela as Clobberella, and Fry as Captain Yesterday. They don't have any, exclusive to them powers, but they are superpowered. And that's the whole episode. The core 3 get superpowers and hijinks ensue. There is a story about Leela getting a day pass for her parents so they can come out of the sewers for a day, but her dad also blabs about his daughter's secret identity, which puts them in mortal peril. The zookeeper is fun. I genuinely enjoy him. He's a creative villain, and I love the elephant that never forgets to kill. But the episode is very one-note. It's trying to be the send-up of old Adam West era superhero shows, but it doesn't really do anything beyond that. It feels like an anthology of interest segment that was too long to put into an anthology, so they just made it its own episode. And frankly, that's a problem with about a quarter of this season. They just feel like anthology ideas that they had to stretch out. I think I would have liked this episode more if it was just 7 to 10 minutes long and they cut out all the extra padding. Which is wild considering the next episode also feels like an anthology idea, just done better. It's just, it never really sticks it. It does have a lot of good jokes, it's just kind of a grind to get to them. There's just way too much empty space in the episode. Less Than Hero is a crime-stopping and crime-committing 7 out of 10. Professor Farnsworth is on the hunt for his beloved Pazuzu, a giant gargoyle griffin thing that has escaped into the stars. He starts to show his age and drives with his blinkers on, so everyone takes him to a wellness spa where they can soak the age right out of you. However, they all fall in and everyone starts getting younger and younger until they're all kids. Leela takes this opportunity to go and have a real relationship with her parents and finally be a kid that gets to grow up in a loving family. I'll say this, no matter what, through the entire episode, none of the crew try and take that from Leela. Fry supporting her is a given, he absolutely adores her, but even Farnsworth doesn't want to tell her that they can revert their ages because he doesn't want to take the one thing she always wanted from her. I don't know, it's so small yet so important that they all really do care about each other. And she's more than happy to go with them and help them all get back to how they were, even if she doesn't want to age up herself. If there wasn't that emotional core to the episode, I think it would have been a misfire like Less Than a Hero in my eyes. But it really elevates itself by not taking Leela's character away from her. So many shows will just shrug away character development for the sake of a dumb one-off episode. But Futurama very rarely does this in the early seasons, which is tragically a very important note. The episode is greater than the sum of its parts, and it's great to see Leela actually genuinely happy. And Kay Segal is still delivering a fantastic job on Leela. She is able to put real emotion behind the lines, and you can really tell. I don't know, I remember not loving the episode as a kid, but nowadays, I get it. I see what they were going for, and it just sort of sticks the landing, especially with Pazuzu swooping in to save the day. Teenage Mutant Leela's Hurdles is a half-shell shredding 8 out of 10. Here's a very interesting Snapple fact for you. Season 5 of Futurama would only have 2 guest stars that had not been on the show previously. I don't know if it's because they were already on the way out or if they just didn't have a place for them, but yeah, no, it's really just the core cast this season, except for this episode and another later on that I had honestly completely forgotten existed. Leela has a date with Chaz, the mayor's aide, so she asks Fry to look after Nibbler. Chaz will be played by Saul Goodman himself, Bob Odenkirk. If you're a fan of the channel, you know I adore Bob Odenkirk, and doing a marathon of the show, it was so great to hear his voice pop up. And this is early 2000s Odenkirk. This is fresh off of Mr. Show and around when he directed his first movie, Melvin Comes to Dinner, which if you haven't seen it, you really should. The amount of star power in that movie is wild. Fred Armisen, James Gunn, just to name a few. Oh boy, he's rambling, which means the episode is bad, right? Nope, easily one of the best of the show. I just really enjoy Bob Odenkirk. So yeah, Fry feels completely worthless and hates that he's just walking Nibbler when Nibbler knocks him out, packs him into his spaceship, and takes off. When they meet up with the other Nibblonians, they reveal that because Fry did do the nasty and the pasty and became his own grandfather, he doesn't have the delta brainwave that makes people susceptible to the brain's influence. So they need him to go into the infosphere that is almost complete and destroy all the brains and escape on his Scooty Puff Jr. While inside the infosphere, Fry finds out that the entire reason he was sent to the future in the first place was all because Nibbler ordered the pizza and tipped his chair back, setting things in motion. That shadow in the pilot was, in fact, the dark matter dropping space soldier. Fry feels understandably used and like his old life was stolen from him to save a future he would have never seen if he wasn't sent to it. I gotta admit, that's pretty heavy stuff for an animated comedy in the early 2000s to tackle. I'd expect it more from, say, Rick and Morty than The Simpsons. Would you doom the future to just get your old life back? I don't know, it's a very well-written episode, and as much as I hate to say it, the Leela date with Chaz is very obviously the weaker part of the episode. Still not bad at all. I could hear Bob Odenkirk go, the mayor's aide, all day, but just, it doesn't have the same weight, which, like, how could it? This had been established since the pilot. Anyway, Fry goes back in the past, tells Nibbler to give him a Scooty Puff Sr., and makes sure the timeline isn't changed. He sacrificed everything to save those he'd grown to care about, and they'd have no idea he ever did it. You could argue he was being selfish by saving Leela, but that's ignoring everyone and everything else he saved with what he gave up. And that's a perfect representation of Fry's character. He may be dumb, but he has a good heart. He genuinely is trying. I really love this episode, and it feels like a great endpoint for Fry's character if we never got any more growth from him at all, even though we're only halfway through the season. That's just how good some of these episodes are. The Why of Fry is a thought-provoking, dark matter dropping 10 out of 10. See, this is why I'm mad this show got canceled this season. If you ask someone what their favorite episodes of the show are, they're largely from this block of episodes. There really was no significant quality drop, and you could tell, even if there weren't a ton of guest stars, they were still trying. Farnsworth needs to get some space honey, but warns it's much too dangerous for the crew to do. Leela takes that personally and decides to prove him wrong and takes Bender and Fry to collect honey. Turns out the bees are what took out the last crew of the Planet Express that we found out about in the pilot, but things go relatively okay until Bender angers the queen and they have to cheese it. Back on the ship, a baby queen bee shoots her stinger and Fry stands in the way of Leela and gets impaled before collapsing. After Fry's funeral, Leela is distraught and starts eating royal honey to try and sleep and begins hallucinating that Fry is talking to her and sending messages, but always begging her to wake up even when she's very obviously awake. She starts to spiral, and before long, everyone is exploding while singing, "Don't worry, be happy," which honestly has this very bright horror element to it. This is a great idea of like a Scary Door Twilight Zone episode done brilliantly. Because as she's spiraling, she eventually does listen to him and wakes up in her hospital room next to a Fry that had been crying and talking to her to try and get her to come out of her coma, and he never left her side for 2 straight weeks. The stinger had gone all the way through him and injected Leela with all the poison. Again, it's not Fry waiting because he thinks he'll get something out of it. He's waiting because he genuinely wants her to be okay. He doesn't want to lose his friend. Granted, the twist of the sting obviously gets more and more predictable the more you watch it, and I think that's why it's so important to have that emotional core. It makes the episode stand out more than just a Twilight Zone idea. It's also great that there's that twinge of drama. It's never just joke after joke after joke. Katie Seagal plays it brilliantly, and you can definitely hear the panic in her voice. There is a weight to the death in the episode, even if Leela's the only one that seems to care that Fry is gone. The sting is as sweet as honey. 10 out of 10. Professor Farnsworth has created a box. His greatest invention yet. A box. What's in the box? Well, wouldn't you like to know, Weather Boy, okay? You know what? You don't have to know anything. Anyway, turns out it's a parallel universe. Yep. A universe where coin flip results are flipped. A universe where Leela's with Fry. A universe where Zoidberg is purple and Bender is gold. It's a very simple idea where basically 2 universes collide and the episode culminates in both professors pulling their universes into their own and basically just have their own universes in boxes. It's very much another anthology segment stretched into a full episode, but I think it absolutely needed the time to make this sort of a vignette adventure. If you have a simple story, you need to drape it with jokes, and this episode is a perfect example of how you do that properly. You keep cutting from one funny scene to another and never really lose the momentum. And of course, you still have the emotional core of Fry and Leela seeing what could have been and the power of a coin flip. It's just a fun episode with a great sci-fi angle, which is just what Futurama is at its core. I don't know, the episode feels genuine and I just really appreciate what they're going for here. If Rick and Morty did a Pocket Universe episode, they'd be more critical of the idea, like calling it something like slavery with extra steps. Futurama never makes you feel dumb if you don't get a joke. They just want you to enjoy yourself and aren't trying to be the smartest show in the room. Rick and Morty is the Frasier of animated series, and Futurama is the Cheers. The Farnsworth paradox never overcomplicates itself and just focuses on telling a solid story. It gives you fun with Zoidbergs. It gives you a great idea of what 2 Benders would be like. It never overcomplicates itself, even while intermingling 2 different universes. The Farnsworth paradox is a coin flipped 9 out of 10. Okay, I adore this episode. It's easily in my top 5 of the whole series. No cap, for real, sheesh. How do you do, fellow kids? I'm hip. When good old President Nixon gives everyone 300 fun bucks because Zap beat the spider people, everyone wonders what they're gonna do with their sudden windfall. Zoidberg thinks he's super rich now and wants to be a big important fancy pants. Fry wants to drink 300 cups of coffee. Bender wants to steal a massive cigar, and yeah, it's just a vignette episode. It's just a bunch of different stories going on at the same time that all culminate in a museum fire. I don't want to get too in the weeds about the story, since the story is really just, what if everyone got 300 bucks? But what they do with that is just so dang evergreen. The jokes are really solid, and you can tell all the actors are just having fun with the lines. I kind of wonder how much of it was improvised and how much they had fleshed out initially. I don't know, there's just a ton of charm to the episode that makes it stand out because it never takes itself too seriously or compromises who a character is for the joke. These are all realistic things these characters would do. Hermes buying his son stilts he doesn't want and then uses them himself? Classic Conrad. I don't know, not every episode needs to be critically analyzed down to the absolute core of its being. Sometimes a good episode is just good. Oh, and there's a special guest star. Roseanne Barr of Mr. Bertram fame. Mr. Bertram review available right now. Shameless plug, ho! It's kind of funny hearing her in this because she's genuinely upbeat and has a lot of energy compared to her performance in Mr. Bertram where she just sounds dead inside. Like, it's small, but if you say your lines with a smile, they'll sound more lively and energetic. And you can tell she was enjoying delivering these lines even in the credits, or was way better at hiding her disdain 20 years ago. 300 Big Boys is a properly caffeinated 9 out of 10. Fry and the gang are on the hunt for Fry's beloved Bigfoot. They go to the Duraflame National Park, and while camping, Fry goes out wandering and loses his nose after being abducted by a UFO. Turns out his nose was taken and sold to Lur of Omicron Persei 8 because it's something of an aphrodisiac. Fry tries to convince him to give him back his nose, and Lur ends up determined to take his other horn to try and save his marriage. They hunt Fry, run into Bigfoot. Lur defends Bigfoot from a park ranger that wants to steal Bigfoot's feet, and the spark between him and his wife is rekindled. I think the episode really hinges on if you care about Lur at all. If you enjoy Lur in his earlier appearances, you'll probably love this episode. And if you don't, you'll just sort of stare blankly at it until the credits roll. The episode isn't bad by any means, but it's just not all that memorable. Like, I remembered what happens in the episode, but I just never really cared about it, you know? I never quote jokes from this episode. It's not the best Futurama episode, but it's definitely not the worst. It's just kind of there. Oh yeah, it's the one where Fry gets abducted and there's a Bigfoot. Neat. The jokes are okay, the story is fine, and the whole thing is just very middle of the road. Which, like, I'll take a middle of the road early Futurama episode over a bad later Futurama episode any day. There's nothing I'd say is truly horrendous, but if you check out halfway through, I really don't blame you. Spanish Fry is a cryptid-loving 6 out of 10. Man, remember when cryptid stuff didn't snake its way to Flat Earth? Simpler times. I miss OG cryptids. Hee-haw, wee snaw. What an episode. Hermes is competing in the limbo event at the 3004 Olympics with a special swimming suit to help him get a leg up over his eternal rival, Barbados Slim. The Slim suit splits, his gut knocks a pole off, and he's humiliated. Poor Hermes. You feel for the guy. But what's the bulk of the episode about? Bender thinks he can win in the men's division of bending, but when he sees he's probably going to get trounced, he pretends to be a fembot named Coilette from Robonia, a totally real country he did not make up, and proceeds to dominate the women's division as a man-bot dressed as a fembot. But when he receives his medals, they say they have to test the oil of winners, so Bender goes to the professor for robotic gender reassignment surgery, so he'll pass the tests and keep his medals. Now, as a fembot, he goes on a late-night talk show and starts flirting with Calculon, and the two begin a romance that culminates in Calculon asking Coilette to marry him, and Bender's more than happy to marry him and take his money, even faking their own demise on the wedding day to sneak away. It's kind of funny that South Park made an episode with this same kind of idea in 2019 with Bored Girls. It shows how this topic has been in debate and is still in debate today. I don't know. A hot take. Bender-centric episodes can be pretty hit or miss, and Ben-Hur just never really did anything for me. As much as I love Maurice LaMarche, Calculon can just get annoying after a point, and having a Bender and Calculon plot just feels overdone. And we still have another one later in this season alone, and we only have 3 more episodes to go. Ben-Hur is never trying to have a conversation or take a deeper dive into ideas, and it absolutely doesn't need to. It's Futurama. But I don't know, if you hold it up to things like The Why of Fry, The Sting, or even 300 Big Boys, it just kinda drags. Again, it feels like an anthology episode that got stretched out. What if Bender was a fembot instead of a manbot? That's it. That's the whole episode. It's fine, I guess. Ben-Hur is a limbo lumbar lacking 5 out of 10. Mom's Friendly Robot Company unveils a new high-tech robot to assist everyone, and Bender hates that this new robot has effectively gotten rid of his purpose at Planet Express and made him look obsolete. So, Professor Farnsworth has him sent to a factory to get a chip installed that'll make him appreciate the new little robotic buddy. Only he proceeds to break out of the factory and goes to meet other obsolete robots and gets a brand new wood body and vows revenge on the filthy earthlings and their high-tech world. Spoilers, it was all in his head and none of it mattered. It's literally just the bare concept of the Sting with no emotional core and with Bender as the focus. Again, Bender episodes can be super hit or miss, and this one is just pretty bland, all things considered. I will say the one thing that absolutely got me was the water-powered robot freaking out whenever she ran out of water and just starts booking it to the nearest stream to save her life. It was used just enough times that it didn't feel overused. And I don't know. I really appreciated the joke, and the delivery was perfect. Otherwise, this is just a nothing episode. What if Bender was obsolete? It's sort of there. I would be surprised if this was anyone's favorite episode of the entire series. Like, they're just like, oh yeah, absolutely famous, favorite episode. Absolute best jokes, best everything. There's no one out there that'll say that. I believe that they are body snatchers if they believe that. You will have seen this episode and known it, and that's honestly about it. I don't know. It's fine. And I don't think it's anyone's least favorite episode either, for what it's worth. It's just another perfectly middling nothing experience. Obsoletely Fabulous is a splintered 6 out of 10. I promise I like the show. I really, truly do. I have talked about how great the other episodes are. It's just the end of the season just has some misses. It's like, oh, look, it's more Bender. Yay. I just want to be clear. I love John DiMaggio, and he is a wonderful voice actor who does an absolutely incredible performance and brought Bender to life like only he can and made him a cultural icon. I just feel like it's a studio note that seasons had to have more and more Bender, so they look for ways to make him the focus of episodes. Granted, he only has 3 episodes a season focused on him of a 16-episode run, but when they're clustered like this, it feels like a lot. When a robot short circuits on the set of All My Circuits, Bender stacks the audition process so he can replace the child actor and get his big break on TV. However, when he's supposed to pretend he's in a coma, he starts putting on a giant show, and the kids love him. They start idolizing their foul-mouthed TV icon, so Professor Farnsworth and Hermes start up the Fathers Against Rude Television to get Bender taken off the air, an obvious satire of the American Family Association and other groups that would try and lobby for crass or obscene elements to be taken out of shows that might impact kids, even in shows that were not made for younger audiences. If you enjoy a show, they probably hated it for some dumb reason. So when Cubert, Dwight, and Tiny Tim Bot steal from Bender, he joins with Hermes and Farnsworth to get himself taken off the air, and then starts talking directly into the TV about how parents should take the reins and decide what is and isn't appropriate for their kids, instead of forcing all shows to follow their rigid rules. Simpsons did it, Family Guy did it, even King of the Hill touched on it. Creative freedom is important, and if you don't think a kid should be watching something, just sort of stop them from watching it, maybe. It's a topical episode that stayed surprisingly evergreen, but other than the message of just letting creators create, it's just kinda there. It's the strongest of the past 3 episodes, and it doesn't necessarily feel stretched, but it's just more Bender and Calculon. It never takes that extra step to make the episode feel truly memorable. Bender should not be allowed on TV is a content warning provided 7 out of 10. It's baffling that people found controversy in Futurama looking back on it 20 years later. And here we are, the first series finale. The show would have 2 more series finales and still keep going. It's a wild ride. Buckle up. Remember when Fry was able to play the holophone in Parasites Lost? Hey, so does the show. Fry is determined to show Leela how much he truly cares about her, and he starts taking holophone lessons so he can be as good as he was with the parasites. He keeps practicing, but when he's struggling, he makes a deal with the Robot Devil, and they swap hands with the Robot Devil, instantly regretting the deal as his new fleshy digits get in the way more often than not, and he starts scheming to get his hands back, even eventually giving Bender an air horn for a nose so he can sabotage Leela listening to Fry's opera, and use that to weasel his way into getting Fry to give him his hands back. The most important things about this episode are Fry's feelings for Leela and his inherent creativity. He made a deal with the Robot Devil not to make himself smarter or more creative, but to help him bring what he has in his head to life. He's a genuinely creative individual that just wants to show the woman he loves how important she is to him and what he thinks of her. Even his opera doesn't focus on him and trying to be with her, but rather Leela and all the obstacles she's had to overcome to get where she is today, and why he cares about her so much. And I gotta say, I do enjoy Dan Castellaneta, I really truly do, but I'll admit the Robot Devil just felt a little too involved in the episode. He didn't need to be skulking around in every scene, and I feel like that time could have been better spent focusing on Fry constructing this opera. And I honestly think that's just hindsight, and it's a nitpick note at that. It's not really a big deal. But this would be the last episode to air, and it was planned to be the last episode to air. There's even a message at the beginning of the episode that says, "See you on some other channel." This is how they wanted to wrap the story. Not with some grandiose conclusion like Why of Fry, but something much more down to earth. The story of the love between a man from the past and a one-eyed mutant. This was such an affectionate send-off that you can tell no one really wanted this to be the last episode, but if it has to end, they're ending on a high note. The episode has solid jokes, great acting, and while Katie Seagal's singing isn't amazing or anything, it's touching that both Fry and Leela are imperfect people, finding a perfect love between them, and that's okay. The Devil's Hands Are Idle Playthings is a triumphant 10 out of 10. And this is where the series was left for 5 years. This is the note Futurama went out on, and honestly, it's very, very easy to see why these 72 episodes effectively became animated gospel for a lot of people. Even though Futurama didn't hit the golden 100 episodes for syndication, it still had enough episodes that it could stay in reruns and very rarely double up. Think about it. You play 2 episodes a day like Adult Swim did, and you still wouldn't get through all the episodes in just a month. Every month and a half for 5 years, every episode of Futurama would be in full rotation. To give you context for that, The Simpsons in 2003 was celebrating its 14th season and had over 300 episodes. The chances you were getting an episode worth your time in comparison were absurdly low compared to the compact high quality that Futurama provided. I genuinely believe the show having those just 72 episodes is one of the many secrets to its long-term success. There's no episode that I'd say is absolutely worth skipping, and that's something I couldn't even do with something like American Dad. Futurama was left to be rewatched, obsessed over in DVD marathons, and ironically was canceled at the perfect time for it to thrive on cable during its absolute prime and would succeed on streaming as well. And what we get next is going to be an entirely different beast of a billion backs. Anyway, that's season 5. Anything you think I was right on, wrong on? What was your favorite episode? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked what you saw, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you want access to these videos early, support the channel, and get exclusive content, make sure to join our Patreon or membership program. $2 a month and you even get put on this fancy list. Ooh! Thank you all so much for watching, and we still have so much more to go through, both good and bad. Stay strong, keep fighting, know I always believe in you, and a new dawn is coming. I can feel it. I'll see you next time when we get our movie fix with Season 6. Goodbye, everybody.